Well, it is my pleasure right now to introduce to you Robert Prentice, JD, our keynote speaker today. Dr. Prentice is professor of business law at UT's McCombs School of Business, as well as chair of the Business, Government, and Society Department, faculty director of the Business Honors Program, and director of the Ethics Unwrapped video series. He has won over 60 teaching awards and published several textbooks and dozens of articles. Dr. Prentice's talk, Winning in the Game of Life, is perfect for our Happy Days theme today. We're lucky and delighted to have him here. Please welcome Dr. Prentice to the podium.
I'm doing well. Nice to see you. When my wife finds out I was introduced by Jim Spencer, I'm going to go like way, way up in her estimation. I'm so happy. Gail Height over here, wave Gail, has been a good friend to me for a long time. And last March or so asked me to give a talk on winning the game of life. And as you can tell by looking at me, I don't have a lot of personal experience in winning the game of life. But I'm an academic. It's one of those who can do and those who can't teach sort of things, I think. And so I thought, well, maybe I can figure this out, how you win the game of life. And so I got a book. I was actually reading a book at the time called Humankind, and it's got a lot of interesting factoids, one of which is that you, actually all of us, share 60% of our DNA with a banana. And our brain is 10% smaller than a Neanderthals, and they went extinct 40,000 years ago. And since then, our brains have gotten 10% smaller. So I'm just trying to lower your expectations just a little bit in terms of winning the game of life. We got to do the best we can with what we've got, but our tools may be limited. So as I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do you win the game of life? Because I didn't really have a good theory on this. I drew some inspiration from a pretty sad event in my life. About 2 months ago, we buried my mother-in-law, Betty Dunn. She was Graham to our daughters, Graham to me, and she was a really wonderful person. And being 92, almost 93, she had always said there wouldn't be anybody at her funeral because all of her friends had already died. She had outlived her 4 brothers. But her funeral was jam-packed. And the terms I heard over and over again were a life well lived, a life well lived, a life well lived. And I thought to myself, okay, now I think I've got a theory here. The way you win at the game of life is you live as good a life as you can for as long a time as you're allotted here on planet Earth. Not everybody's going to get 92 years like she did. Some of you may get more. A lot of us may get less. But we want to do the best we can with every day we've got right here on planet Earth. So how do we do that? Well, I was in Graham's hospital room and had bought a recent book, and it's called Life in 3 Dimensions. And this is by a professor of psychology at the University of Chicago. And he said traditionally there have been 2 theories by academics as to how to win at life, lead a good life. And he had a 3rd theory. And so let me tell you about these 3 theories this guy talks about in his book. One is a good life is a happy life. And I think I can kind of go with that. Do the stuff that makes you happy. Do it every day. That's probably a pretty good way to live a good life. How do you be happy? Well, academics have been studying this for almost 100 years. They've got a lot of theories, and you've probably read about some of them in the newspaper. One thing that's clear is that experiences are better than things. For most people, you're more likely to be happy doing stuff with people rather than buying a new flat screen TV that's slightly larger than your last flat screen TV, or a new sofa that's just slightly bigger than your last sofa. Do stuff with people. Money's nice. Don't want to complain about money. More money's usually good. But there's a limit to how much more happiness you can get with more money. And there's almost no limit to how much more happiness you can get doing stuff with people. That makes all the difference. You know, I teach a bunch of kids down at UT, which are a lot of fun. I love the kids. But when I talk to them about happiness, I say, you know, in your age range, stuff that makes you happy are experiences, going to the big football game on Saturday, going to 6th Street on Friday night, going to the next Taylor Swift concert, having sex. All that's good. Don't want to begrudge you that. That's awesome. But when you get into our age range, happiness is a little less intense, I think, but kind of broader and more satisfying. We think about the types of lives that we have lived, and if we're satisfied with those lives, that is a kind of happiness that you just can't top. Talk about that a little bit more in just a minute. The second overall theory that people have is that a good life is a life of meaning. I kind of like this notion. I think that I look in my mirror a lot of times, now that I'm in my age range, and ask myself what kind of life I've lived, and if I'm proud of it, and if I'm satisfied with it, and if I had some things maybe I wish that I had done better. Albert Bandura, professor at Stanford, says, an all-embracing morality includes doing good things, not just refraining from bad ones. I've been pretty good in my life at refraining from doing bad things. No arrests, or at least no convictions. And I've done some good things, but not as many as I wish I had. I think I'd be more satisfied with my life if I had done more good things. Studies show, again, we got psychologists out there studying this stuff all the time, pro-social behavior, doing stuff for other people, leads to a more meaningful life. And I've been preempted by everything I've heard here about this organization. Love, love, love hearing that. Maybe I should have never gotten up here. I should have just sat down and kept my mouth shut, because the message that I was going to give, I think, has been emphasized by all of our videos. One more thing about just a meaningful life, and I bring this up because it fits me. What do we regret? When we look back on our lives, the things that maybe make our lives less meaningful than they could have been, and studies show what we regret are not our wants. We don't sit around thinking, oh gosh, wish I'd bought that fancy sports car, although now that I've walked past a couple outside, maybe I have a little bit of regret there. Or that vacation home in Aspen or whatever. What we tend to regret when we look in that mirror are their oughts, the things that we ought to have done and didn't do, the obligations we had that we didn't live up to, the people we should have helped that we didn't help. That can keep you from leading a meaningful life. A message to keep in mind. Finally, our third theory comes from our professor at the University of Chicago, Professor Oishi, and he recommends a life of curiosity. He wants a psychologically rich life. I like the term. And to him, it means a life of curiosity. Don't just sit at home and just assume you already know everything. Do some looking out there at other people, what other people are doing, what other people think. Exploration. Again, explore. Explore new languages, explore new cultures, explore new religions. There are a million different new thoughts out there that you should be looking at. And experience them to the extent that you can. If you can still travel, you afford to travel, dynamite, do that. If you can't, there's a lot you can do just in Austin, Texas. He stresses novelty, do new things, not just the same old thing every day. He stresses play. Some of us in here, including me, have a habit of just like work, 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 work. He recommends play as much as you can. And again, he talks about perspective changes. Don't just assume that you know everything there is to know right now. Look at other people's points of view. If you look across our society, we've got a lot of different points of view on a lot of different topics, religion, politics, etc. Be open to other people's ideas. You don't have to adopt them, but at least be open to them and think about them. So, having talked about the three big theories for a happy life, for winning the game of life, I want to say two things. First, do all three. Why not do all three? Do the things that make you happy. I don't think I'm ever going to go skydiving again or bungee jumping again. I'm glad I did. But there are a lot of things that make me happy, and I need to think about doing them more often, doing them all the time. I can do so many of them right here in Austin, Texas, without ever even leaving my neighborhood. Do things that give your life meaning. I think that's very important too. Help people out. Volunteer. Donate to causes you believe in, as a bunch of you did. just a little bit ago. Donate to political candidates who are going to help shape a world that is in the vision that you would like to have. Help other people, one of the best ways in the world to lead a meaningful life. And follow Oishi's advice. Cultivate new experiences that contribute to a psychologically rich life. Be open to other ideas and other experiences. Do all three. Second thing I want to say is, for my money, if you got to choose between these three, and I don't really think you do, I think you can choose all three. But if you have to choose between the three, I would go with a life of meaning myself. I like this quote from a guy named Leo Roston, who wrote, "I cannot believe that the purpose of life is to be happy. I think the purpose of life is to be useful, to be responsible, to be honorable, to be compassionate." This is a message I want my daughters to hear. It is above all to matter, to stand for something, to have it make a difference that you have lived at all. I think a life of meaning is the most important of those three types, if you have to decide which one you want to emphasize. I ask my students, and it's hard for them to even imagine this, but what do you want people to say at your funeral? You think they're going to say, oh, he had 2 really nice cars, and he had a house that was like 4,000 square feet, and he had $18 million in his bank account when he died? That's not what they're going to say at your funeral. People who are asked to speak at your funeral are going to want to say they were a good person, a loving person, a faithful spouse, a good neighbor, active in the community, a good citizen. That's what they're going to want to say, and that's what you're going to want to have said about you. Did you live a life of meaning? Did you leave the world a better place? The things I heard about my mother-in-law at her funeral were that kind of thing. Somebody said they'd known her for 30 years and they'd never heard her say no when somebody asked her for a favor. No matter how big, no matter how small, her answer was always yes. Now, because I teach ethics, I should sit down and shut up right now, but because I teach ethics, I got to say just a couple more things. Let me start talking about evolution real fast. The reason we are here and we are who we are is that our ancestors did a really good job of competing for resources as they traveled around in bands of 150 or so across Africa and later Europe and other parts of the world. The way they won the battle, beat the Neanderthals, etc., was by developing rules that kept people in line, that helped members of the group remember that I need to be helping others in the group, and rules that punished people who were not doing the right thing. And so we end up with legal rules and moral rules and religious rules, all with the purpose of having us support the group and not undermine the group. Let me tell you quickly about my spiritual journey. When I was 6 years old, I was growing up on a farm in Kansas. And I was over playing with my best friend, Julianne Shanline, and her sister, Frances, who was an 11-year-old juvenile delinquent, already stealing her dad's cigarettes and smoking them out behind the barn, took it upon herself to tell me there was no Santa Claus. What? I ran to my mom, who was there having coffee with Julianne's mother, and I said, Mom, she says there's no Santa Claus. And my mom said, yeah, well, Robert, about time you knew, there's no Santa Claus. Darn. So I'm playing with Julianne some more, and I come back and I say, no Easter Bunny? Mom says, no, there's no Easter Bunny. A little bit later, no Tooth Fairy? No, Robert, there's no Tooth Fairy. I'm having a bad day here. And I think about it some more. I think about all the things that adults tell you are there, but you never see, and I go back and I say, and no God? And she said, oh, no, there's a God. But at that age, I couldn't tell any difference between God and the Easter Bunny. I didn't see either one of them. And so for most of my life, I was a member of the Church of the Hubble Telescope. I believe it if I see it. But as we get older, our minds get more sophisticated, and we learn new things, and we look at things in a new way. And so about the time I got to be 65, I learned that our universe is 13.8 billion years old. And that in the known universe, we have 2 trillion galaxies. Think about how long 13.8 billion years is. Think about how big 2 trillion galaxies is. It's very big. And yet in all that known universe and all that known time, the only time we know that, well, what I'm concerned with, right here on Earth, just as I turn 65, just as I need it, Viagra's invented. So don't tell me there's no God. I'm not believing it. So back to the evolution thing. A lot of social comparison. When we go through life, we spend our lives constantly judging others and being judged in a social way. How do they fit in with my life? Do I want to make an investment in them? If you're just interested in short-term sex, then you're looking at factors like how attractive are they, how fit are they, and that sort of thing. But if you want to make a long-term investment as a friend, as a romantic partner, as a business partner, that's not really what you look at. We try to gain a global impression, a holistic impression of other people, and we do that primarily by looking at their moral factors. They're what scientists call competence factors, and we take that into account. How smart are they? How athletic are they? How musical? How mechanical are they? We take all that into account. But more than twice as important as that, when we're making a judgment, is what are their moral traits? When we say, I think I really know that guy or that gal, we only say that after we've got a good judgment as to their moral characteristics. And when we find out they're not as musical as we thought, well, our impression of them may go down a little bit. But when we find out they're not as moral as we thought, our judgment of them goes way down, because morality is so important. We look for things like honesty, trustworthiness. Are they helpful? Are they compassionate? Are they loyal, responsible, sincere, humble, fair? That's how we judge other people. That's how we decide whether or not we want to make an investment in them. What makes you, you? It's your brain, of course. Your brain is like everything. It runs your memory and your thoughts and your motor stuff, how you move your body, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's you. So when you have an injury or a disease that affects a part of your brain, let's say it affects your memory, what people are going to say about you is, you know, Grandpa, he can remember where he went to grade school in 1955, but he can't remember what he had for breakfast. Or if the injury or disease affects your brain and like where the words come from. People will say, well, Grandpa, you know, he's got a lot going on inside his head, but he can't find the right word to say it. But if what's been impacted is your moral core, then what people say is, he's just not Grandpa anymore. Because that moral core is the essence of you, and you are the essence of your moral core. And everybody knows that, and everybody judges you that way, and that's why it's really important to try to be a good person. I will tell you, Graham was, in my experience, and I knew her for 37 years, all of those things, in spades. And that's how she won the game of life, and how you can win it too. I want to just say a new quotation and repeat one, because these are kind of my favorites. Nicholas Kristof is a quote I just ran across this morning. A growing body of research in psychology and neuroscience suggests helping others makes us happy and even leaves us healthier and able to live longer lives. There's a selfish reason to be unselfish. And I like that Leo Roston quote I said earlier. The purpose of life is to be useful, to be responsible, to be compassionate, to stand for something, to have it make a difference, that you lived it all. That's my lesson for you. And now I will sit down and shut up. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Prentice, and it was my honor to introduce you. That was so inspirational. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I loved that. How about you?